I am going to go right down here to the introduction to legal descriptions. So a lot of times when we talk about legal descriptions, we are actually talking about something different than a mailing address. And you can see here that I mentioned that an address like 1303 West School Street is, you might think it is a legal address to sell or convey real estate. However, that type of address was produced for the United States Postal Service, or even actually for 911. It's not really the address we use when we want to convey real estate. So when we convey real estate or a parcel of real estate, we use what is called a legal description. Now, I'm going to come over here. Today I was doing some live streaming, and I'm going to go out here and just make a new board for us, and want to title this Legal Descriptions. And there are 3 different legal descriptions you need to know for the real estate exam. The first one is called a meets and bounds legal description. Now, I'm just going to give you some points that you need to know regarding a meets and bounds legal description. First of all, we have what is called a POB. And this stands for point of beginning. Point of beginning. What do we mean by point of beginning? Well, I'm going to open up a new page and just show you this. A meets and bounds legal description this is your POB, this is the point of beginning, and it may say that it goes 200 feet this direction to a point, and then it goes another 200 feet to this point. It goes down 600 feet to a point, and then it goes this way 800 feet to a point, and then it goes 600 feet back to the point of beginning. So there's a couple of interesting things we can gather from a meets and bounds. Number 1, be sure and write this down in your notes. A meets and bounds always begins at the point of beginning, which is what we have right here, the beginning, the point of beginning. It always begins at the point of beginning. And it always what? Good. It always ends at the point of beginning. So we went to a point, we went down to another monument, we went down to another monument, we went over to another monument, and we went back to where? The point of beginning. So these are 2 items that you need to know for the real estate examination. Number 2, it's ideal for irregular shaped parcels of property. Okay, so number 2, ideal for irregular shaped parcels of property. Number 3, it uses monuments. Let's see, monuments. That would be considered a monument, okay? Right there. Those are markers. And so those could be anything such as rocks or trees, years ago, or stakes or rods in the ground that they put there. It could be a number of things. And so as we come back over here to to our session, notice that I mentioned that meets and bounds survey always begins and ends at what is called the point of beginning. Other unique and important points about the meets and bounds survey method: it's ideal for irregular shaped parcels of real estate. We mentioned that. It uses monuments to identify the corners. Monuments are considered fixed objects. Just mentioned that to you. Could be trees, stones, streams, or man-made objects like highways. The meets refer to distances, okay? So this would be the meets. It's referring to the distances between the objects, okay? So that's what, that is another item that you would want to note and make sure that you understand. Bounds, so meets and bounds, meets are the distances. Bounds give reference to what? Direction. It actually confines the length to a particular area. And the final point here is if the meets and bounds description fails to return to the point of beginning, then the legal description is flawed. So bounds, and I'm going to do this in green, is direction. So remember, very important, always has to begin at the point of beginning, and it always has to end at the point of beginning. If it fails to end at the point of beginning, then there's a flaw in the legal description. Now, one time I had a person say, John, they had a question on there you didn't cover in class. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, they wanted to know what this point was. And I said, this point? And they said, yeah, it was the first point in the meets and bounds legal description. And I said, well, the first point is the point of beginning. And they said, no, they were wanting to know what, they drew it out on a paper for me. And that's back when I was doing live classes. And they said, no, they wanted to know what this point was. And I said, well, that would be a monument, right? And so it could be a rock or something like that. But he said, no, they had point of beginning, but they wanted to know what that was. And I said, well, there's no such word for that, or there's nothing references that first point. It's either the point of beginning or it's a monument, okay? Does that make sense? So don't let that trip you up. But right here, if you know all of the key points that I'm mentioning here, you can answer any question over meets and bounds. Now, I have an example here on the next page, and you can kind of see that, and this is not a real good example, but let's just jump over here, and let me just write in here, example of a meets and bounds legal description. And so here, let's see. I wanted to see if there was, I don't use Bing a lot, so see if we can. So here's an example of a meets and bounds legal description right there. A strip of land 50 feet in width lying within the southwest quarter of section 14, township 17, North Range East. 19 East. Now, that's the government rectangular survey system that we're going to talk about next. And it tells the county, and then it says, which is described as follows. It commenced at the south corner of said section 14, thence south 89 degrees, 44 feet west, and it's going to come all the way back to the point, it says the point of ending, but it's the point of beginning. It comes all the way back to the point of ending. And I know that's hard for you to see that legal description, but you can kind of, I don't know if I can enlarge that or not, but that's an example of a meets and bounds legal description. And that's the second thing that as we get into the government rectangular survey system that I want you to know, and you need to know for the exam, is that you can use, let me erase that. You can use more than one legal description on the deed. Okay, so you can use more than one legal description on the deed. Keep that in mind. That could be a test question. So in other words, I just showed you the government rectangular survey system that we're going to talk about next. I probably shouldn't abbreviate. So they use the government rectangular survey system, and they used the meets and bounds. So you could have two legal descriptions. Now, let's just back up, and I'm sure some of you are probably saying, well, okay, John, I get it. We have these legal descriptions. But what are we using these for? Well, that's a great question, and I'm glad somebody thought of that, okay? When you sell property, and as we move through the course, when you sell real estate, you have to use what is called a deed, and there are different types of deeds that we will study, but you're going to use one deed, and in this case, I'll just call it a warranty deed, a general warranty deed. There are quick claim deeds and so forth, but this is a general warranty deed, best type of deed you can have. And you're going to use this deed, and on this deed, you're going to sell, convey, whatever, give the real estate that you own, and your real estate is identified by a legal description. So on the deed will be the legal description that is actually conveying the real estate to the new owners. And remember what we talked about a few weeks ago, where you could have fee simple determinable or fee determinable. Well, or it could be a legal life estate. That's all going to be included on the deed. And so the deed may say, you know, it's a fee simple estate, but there are restrictions in book 114, page 82 of the county records. And so you need to go and look that up and see what that is. Now, just as a quick side note here, I had I had a situation recently where a complaint was filed against me and someone else in my office with the Missouri Real Estate Commission. Now, I've already responded to the complaint. I didn't do anything wrong, but just to show you how this all works, because I think this is important for you to understand. So I had a property listed, and on the MLS, first of all, in the seller's disclosure, we said that there was a water problem in the backyard when there were heavy rains. We also disclosed that in the multiple listing service for the agent remarks. When it rains, there's a water problem. Now, my seller was a single lady who had gone through a divorce and did not have a lot of money. That's why she was selling her house. And I recommended to her, she said, I had a person look at it. They gave me a bid for $2,000 to fix it. John, I don't have the money to fix the water problem. And I said, not a problem. What we can do is we'll disclose it, and we can give, if you're willing to do that, a $2,000 credit at the closing table that they can use to go toward the water issue. She said, that's fine with me. So I disclose it on the seller's disclosure. We disclose it in the multiple listing service. There's another agent from another company who's representing a buyer as a buyer's agent. Now, I am representing the seller as a seller's agent. So my fiduciary obligations are to the seller. The buyer's agent's fiduciary obligations are to the buyer. The buyer purchases this home through FaceTime. They were in another state and they bought it through FaceTime. That happens a lot today, so you just be ready for that, okay? So the buyer writes a contract. It's disclosed there's water when it rains. We provide at closing a $2,000 credit. So the buyer got $2,000 on the day of closing. The buyer's agent knew about it. The buyer knew about it because they signed the seller's disclosure, and it clearly states on the seller's disclosure there's a water issue. And so we close the deal. Buyer gets their $2,000. A whole year goes by, practically a year. And the buyer files a complaint with the real estate commission because they get water in the backyard. Well, you got $2,000 on the day of closing, and you also had an inspection, had a right to inspect it, and you should have used due diligence. And the buyer's agent should have recommended or had an inspector or someone familiar with water issues look at that and see if $2,000 would have taken care of that. I don't know. I'm just relying on what my client said. She had someone give her a bid, and that's what it was. So they filed a complaint. I replied to all of this. Now, one of the other things that the buyer complained about in her complaint was that she didn't know that there was that there was an assessment for the roads in the subdivision or for the association. The assessment was actually for the water. Can't remember all the details. But this is why I'm telling you this whole story, okay? Because we're talking about, if I went back over here, we're talking about the warranty deed. And remember this little piece down here at the bottom that I mentioned to you, that it said you can look at the information on book such and such, page such and such, okay? So on the sales contract, you're going to be a buyer's agent working with buyers, right? You're going to sell a house. Title company is going to give you title insurance. You're going to look at that title insurance because you, as a buyer's agent, when we talk about agency, have fiduciary obligations. And you're going to look at that title insurance and you're going to say, hey, there's something going on here in book 234, page 856, because it says the title company is going to say, we're not covering, or this is an exception, whatever is listed in this book at that page. So I go to the courthouse, after the complaint came in, and I clearly look up the book and the page number because I'm like, okay, what's going on? Well, if you look at that book and that page, it tells you there is association fees. Now, as a buyer's agent, that agent should have investigated that for their client. Now she's saying to the real estate commission, no one told me this. Well, on the sales contract, and I pointed it out in my reply to the commission, the buyer clearly in the sales contract says when they get the title commitment, they have X number of days to object about anything listed in the title insurance. And we'll get to title insurance in chapter 13. And I said to the commission, first of all, the agent should have pulled that up for their client. Secondly, the contract clearly states that the buyer had 10 days to object to anything. They didn't. So we shouldn't be liable for that. So can you see how this all kind of starts fitting together and so forth? So that deed is not only going to have the legal description, but it's going to have other things as we get into chapter 13 on deeds, such as restrictions and what type of title, which we've already talked about. Is it fee simple? Is it a legal life estate or anything like that? So this all starts fitting together. But in order to convey or sell the property or give it to someone or transfer it to someone, you have to have a legal description. Okay, so that's why I wanted to just back up and bring all of that to you so that you could understand a little bit better about why are we looking at all of these. Now, any questions? Again, you can type these in. I'll throw them up on the screen and you can ask me those and I will, if you have any questions. So had several people on, and see a couple of people went off. If you're on here and you're studying, let me tell you what, you're going to pass this test because you need to participate and watch these, and hopefully I'm not boring, but I'll try to keep everything going here. So meets and bounds. So anytime you have a question, just type it in. I'll be taking a look at those. So again, meets and bounds. Remember, I'm going to just jump over here. Always begins and ends at the point of beginning. Ideal for irregular shaped partials. Uses monuments that we talked about, which could be trees or rocks or rods or highway corners or whatever. The meets right here refers to distances. And the bounds refer to direction. Always has to begin and end at the point of beginning. You know all of that information there, you're going to be fine. So let's go now to back over here to number 1. And we're going to talk about the second type of legal description, which is a government rectangular, I'm going to abbreviate, survey system. So what are we talking about with a government rectangular survey system? Well, in the old days, years ago, they would survey property, and this is the northwest corner. This is a southwest corner, and I'm going to come over here, and this would be the northeast corner, and we'll come back here. That's the southeast corner of this, and so forth. So what they did, the surveyors, they used things called chains, and they would go over, and so they would survey out, and I'm going to try to draw this out and hopefully get this correct. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I may have to throw one more line in there. We'll put it right there, okay? And I know this is not real straight, so my apologies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, well, yeah, that was not good. But it'll be okay. There we go. Okay. So they started surveying up in the northeast corner, and they would lay these chains down, and they would go in this direction, and then they got over here to number 6. Well, instead of picking up all of their tools and coming back to the other end, they just dropped down and they surveyed back this direction. And then they dropped down and they would survey back this direction. Actually, I'm going to do something different there. And so they were picking up their chains and they were going in each direction, and they would come up with all of these measurements and different items. And lo and behold, when they finished 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. And I don't know how I didn't get 36 there. Did I mess something up? 13, 14, 15, 16. Oh, I missed 21. I thought something was wrong there. My apologies. 22, 23, 24, 25, good learning experience. So you can 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. I saw something on Instagram where a person was changing grades. They were bad grades. They were changing them to A pluses. So 33. Okay, there we go. I thought, what did I do wrong here? 34, 35, and 36. There we go. So this is what, we call this a township. TWP is what you might see on the exam, but it's a township. And what do you notice about these? Well, there are 36 blocks, or what we refer to as sections, in a township. So this, I'm going to use green, is a section. This is a section. All of these are sections. Okay, because there's 36 sections in a township. A section is 1 mile wide by 1 mile, 1 mile by 1 mile, which tells us then a township would be 6 miles by 6 miles. Okay? Because if each section is 1 mile by 1 mile, then there would be 6 miles across here. And again, 6 miles this way. So don't forget, each section is 1 mile by 1 mile. Now I'm going to jump in to a section here in a minute. I put section 16 in red because section 16, the original proceeds from the sale of that went to the school. So whenever they sold this land, the United States, years ago, the proceeds of section 16 went to help fund the school in that specific area. Now, there's several things here they could ask you on the test. You know, how many sections are in a township? 36. How big's a township? 6 miles by 6 miles. What's unique about chapter 16? Well, the proceeds went to help fund the school. What section is immediately below section 20? Well, you're going to have to draw this out on scratch paper and you'll get down. So what section is immediately below section 20? Well, it would be 29, wouldn't it, if that was a question you saw. So lots of different questions they could have right here, and you just need to kind of know how this is all mapped out. Let's draw another. Let's now superimpose that section. So we're just really looking at a section now. In other words, what I'm doing is I'm just lifting one of these 36 sections, any one of them, and I'm blowing this up to say what's unique about this section. Well, we already know one thing about that's unique about a section is what? It's 1 mile by 1 mile. So we could put here that a section is 1 mile by 1 mile. Okay? We could also know, because I'm going to tell you this, that there are 640 acres in a section. 640 acres in a section. Now, this is unique because here's a possible exam question that you could see. They love this question. Farmer Smith, this is a legal description you could see, purchased a property that was 1 mile square plus 15 acres. If Farmer Smith paid $5,000 per acre, how much did he pay for the property? Now, when you first look at that, it kind of freaks you out a little bit because you're like, a mile, 1 mile square plus 15 acres. Well, it's very easy because 1 mile square is 640 acres. So what did Farmer Smith actually purchase? Farmer Smith actually purchased 640 acres plus 15 acres, which is 655 acres. And if we multiply that times $5,000 per acre that Farmer Smith paid for that, then the answer would be, I can tell you this here, 655 times 5,000 is $3,275,000. They love that question, something similar to that. Or they could say, if Farmer Smith purchased 2 sections and 23 acres and he paid $5,000, what did he pay for it? Well, it would be 640 times 2, right? Or they could say Farmer Smith purchased section 14 and 20 acres. Or they could say Farmer Smith purchased section 10 and half of section 11 and 15 acres and paid what? Well, it would be 640 plus 320 because he purchased one section, half of another, plus whatever acreage it was. So see how you can work these? So you have to put this to memory that there are 640 acres in a section. You could see any kind of question on that. And if you know and can remember how many acres are in a section, you'll be able to answer that question with no problem. Now, let's kind of look at something else here. In a section, you could see, and I don't, I teach this and I don't know if they'll ask this to you on the exam or not, but this is a section. Again, I'm just kind of blowing up a section and we're kind of looking at it. And we know that in a section, it's 1 mile by 1 mile, right? We know that. We also know there are 640 acres in a section. Now, they could ask you how many acres are in the northwest quarter of the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter of section 10, township 35 north, range 5 east. And don't let this bother you because it's very easy to solve. Get your calculator out. So get your calculator out. And what you want to do is, and by the way, if I wanted to draw this out, I would read it backwards and say the southeast quarter of the northwest quarter of the northwest quarter. So this is what he sold, this piece right here. In this question, they want to know how many acres is that? Well, it's real easy. You put 640 in your calculator because that's how many acres are in a section, right? And we divide by 4. So 640 divided by 4 equals 160. And we divide by 4. And we get 40, right? And we divide by 4. And we get 10. So this little spot right here is 10 acres. Now you could see an exam question and all you have to do is put 640 in your calculator, divide by, is it the north fourth, the north half, or whatever. So whatever they give you there, you'll just use your calculator, start with 640, and just divide by, if it's the south half, you divide by 2. If it's the northwest eighth, I don't think you'll see that, but you divide by 8. So normally it's going to be quarters and halves. So you start with 640, divide by 4, divide by 2, divide by 4, whatever they're, just read those and check them off, and then go back and double check, and you'll come up with the acreage with no problem. So that is really pretty much most of the government rectangular survey system. The other item I need to mention to you is this. We have these things that are called principal meridian lines, okay? And I'm going to put this in blue. They're called principal meridian lines. And principal meridian lines, this would be a principal meridian line. They run, you need to know that, principal meridian, they run north and south. Now, how do I know that, or how do I remember that for the test? It's really easy. Very easy. And here's what I want you to do. N for north, and it's really close to the P and the M in the alphabet, okay? They run north and south. We have this thing called baselines that run this way. And baselines run east and west. And the way I associate this, or always remember it, is the B in the alphabet is real close to the E, okay? It's just something, pardon me, it's something that helps me. So principal meridian, they may want to know, do those run north and south or east and west? Well, just remember the P and the M are real close to the north, the N in the alphabet, and baselines, B, are real close to the E in the alphabet. It's just a little trick that I remember, and hopefully that'll help you out too. That's how I remember vertical. Vertical run up and down because the V and the U are close to each other in the alphabet, and horizontal runs, you know, they run the other way. I always just remember that vertical runs up and down and horizontal is going to go sideways. So anyway, all right, so I give you all this information. Same thing, there's your principal meridian lines and so forth. And here's what all of this looks like right here. And I'm not going to go back through that because we've already gone through each of that. But I have some key points in there. And same thing we've already talked about. You can go in and, 16 was sold for the school system. And so all of that information's right there. And then I think I do what I'm doing with you right here in a video. And then the numbering of sections in a township begin in the northeast corner and run westerly. We already talked about that, right? Now, the last legal description we're going to look at is really the lot and block system. And it uses the plat map that is recorded. That's very important. You can see here in the county courthouse. This is usually used inside the city limits. It could be used in a subdivision outside the city limits. But you can see here that it's going to use a plat, and it would be something with the lot and block. I'm going to come over here to 7 and we'll open a new page. With a lot and block, you would have something like lot 3, block H, trying to think of a subdivision that I can, Winchester Hills, let's just say. And then they may go on and describe it like we saw earlier, more specific by using the meets and bounds. So you can use more than one legal description. You could use all three of these could be a way to describe the property. And again, why are we doing this? Because we need this for the deed, because we don't sell property by saying, I'm selling 123 Smith Street, Farmington, Missouri. That's not the way we would convey the property. We identify that property through a legal description. So instead of 123 Smith Street, Farmington, Missouri, it may be Lot 3, Block H, Winchester Hills, described as follows, beginning at this spot and going all the way around and ending at that spot, which is the ending point. So you can see that we have three different types of legal descriptions that you could see on the exam, and different points about each one of those that you need to know.